Good afternoon. Welcome to EduSet Network. Friend, today we have lecture on ethnicity and nationalism. Very important topic. We'll try to understand its meaning, basic features, and of course, what are those theories that explain ethnicity and nationalism, and ethnic conflict and state responses. There are various facets of it. We'll try to understand. And for this lecture on this very topic, we have in studio Dr. Rajan Kumar. He teaches in Jawaharlal Nehru University, one of the premier university of the country, and has authority on this topic. He has written book on ethnicity and nationalism. So certainly will give an insight into the topic and will help us to understand and in a new way and new perspective. So on behalf, I welcome him for EduSet lecture on this very topic. Welcome, sir.
Thank you, Amaranji, and really nice to be here. Thank you so much. And for today, the lecture, I'll divide the entire lecture into two parts. The first part is about ethnicity, and the second part would cover the transition of ethnicity to nationalism, because the topic is ethnicity and nationalism. So the first part is dealing about the ethnicity. I'll explain you what ethnicity is. Then I'll go to different theories of ethnicity, which will include theories like primordialism, constructivism, Marxism, and so on. And then I'll go to explain the conditions for ethnic mobilization, that what are the different conditions under which ethnicity emerges. And then I'll go to explain the ethnic conflicts, different ethnic conflicts, and what is the theoretical background for that conflict. After that, I'll also explain the state responses to ethnic conflicts, so the way different states respond to different kind of ethnic conflicts. So that will constitute the first part of my lecture. And in the part two, the second part, I'll transit from ethnicity to nationalism. My purpose here is to explain how ethnic movements transform itself into a kind of national movement. So that transition is important. What are the conditions for that transition? That I'll discuss in the second part. I'll also take the help of some of the theories which explain the transition. And the important theoretician that I'll deal with in this lecture would be, one is Anderson. You might have heard the name. Anderson is a very famous theoretician on nationalism. Then the second scholar would be Eric Hobsbawm. He's a Marxist scholar. And then we'll also cover Gellner. So these broadly three important scholars will cover to explain the transition from ethnicity to nationalism. And then I'll move to, even if there is an established nation, even in established nations, you have the emergence of ethnic conflict. So how even the established nation established nations have not solved the problem of nationalism. So that we'll discuss towards the end of the part two. So I'll start with part one here, and my first purpose would be to explain what ethnicity is. And as you know that throughout the world, especially in the 1990s, after the breakup of the Soviet Union, the ethnicity became very important. And one of the reasons for the disintegration of the Soviet Union, or one of the reasons for the breakup of the Soviet Union, is supposed to be the rise of ethnic movements in different republics of Soviet Union. And after that, if you see the literature in international politics or literature in political science, so they have explained the breakup of Soviet Union and many other countries, Yugoslavia and other countries, in terms of ethnic conflict. And the scholars have argued that in many places, especially after the 1990s, ethnicity became very important as a phenomenon. And what has happened is that ethnicity, which was what you need to understand is that why is it that ethnicity, which was not so important during the Cold War period, or which was not so important, which was not overwhelmingly important in the international politics, suddenly in the 1990s, why this identity politics become important? If you see, for example, the case of India, even in India, like you have the Kashmir problem, which is emerging in 1990s or late 1980s and 1990s. So why identity politics becomes very important in the international politics or politics in general? So that we'll try to explain in today's lecture. And I'll start with the term, defining the concept ethnicity first. So ethnicity has emerged from the Greek term called ethnos, which means people or nation. So ethnos is the Greek term from which the ethnicity has emerged. And if I have to explain the ethnic community, or if I have to define ethnic community, I think one of the best definitions that I found is from Anthony D. Smith. And he explains ethnic conflict, ethnic community as a human population with shared ancestry, histories, and culture associated with territory, and a sense of solidarity. So in this kind of definition, you'll find that most of the definition on ethnicity are something similar to that. So what you need to understand here is that there are three important features of any ethnic conflict or any ethnicity that you need to understand. First is the objective feature, second is the subjective feature, and third is the behavioral feature. So if you have to explain ethnicity into different kind of features, so then you need to understand the objective features of ethnicity. You also need to understand subjective features because both are complementary. Ethnicity cannot be explained just by taking into consideration just the objective features. It cannot simply be explained just by taking into account subjective features. And so you have to complement your definition, or you have to complement your understanding of ethnicity with objective as well as subjective features, and we'll also understand the behavioral features. So what is the objective features of ethnicity, for instance? The objective features of any ethnicity would include language, territory, religion, culture, etc. These are the objective features because you can see these features. You can have an idea. You can measure these features, and you can have an idea that what are the major causes of ethnic conflict. So these are the objective features of ethnic conflict. And please keep in mind that one ethnic movement may not necessarily be based on just one objective features. It's possible that a certain ethnic conflict, one ethnic conflict includes not just one feature but a number of features, number of objective features. For instance, if I have to explain the ethnic conflict in Kashmir, and the Kashmir, which is part of India and disputed part, as you know. So if I have to explain the ethnic conflict in Kashmir, what is happening here is that the culture, people often argue that Kashmiri culture is very different. People often argue that Kashmiri language is important. Then what has happened that language, culture has got mixed with religion in the case of Kashmir. So the ethnic movement is not based on any one particular feature. You'll find that in most of the cases, ethnicity is based on a number of features, and even the objective feature that I told you. So one ethnic movement can include a number of objective features. So you need to understand that any ethnic conflict can be based on just one feature, or it can have a number of features. Many of the European states, when they started emerging after the Treaty of Westphalia and after 1648, so you'll find that most of them were linguistic, because Poland was based on Polish language, England had the English language, French had the French language, and German had the German language. So it was by and large linguistic. But over the time, in the later years, what has happened is that language has got mixed with other features. And as a result, you'll find that the ethnicity in one part, or ethnic conflict in a particular place, is not based on just one feature. It can have a number of features, maybe 2 or 3 features. So that you need to understand. Second thing to understand is that what is the subjective feature. Objective features you have understood, and I'm repeating: language, territory, religion, etc., culture also. That would constitute the part of the objective features. But the subject it's also about the subjective features. What is subjective features? When I refer to the subjective features of ethnicity, so that will include a sense of belongingness. That why do you think that you belong to a particular Kashmiri culture? Why do you think that you belong to a Naga culture? Why do you think that you belong to a Bengali culture or Tamil culture, for instance? Because it's possible that even if you come from Tamil Nadu, even if you come from Bengal, it's not possible that you know all the person of Bengal. But there is a sense of identity, there is a sense of attachment, that you feel attached to that language, you feel attached to that culture, you feel attached to the particular territory that you have. So that attachment, that imagination, that sense of perception of belonging to that culture, that is what I mean when I say the subjective features of ethnicity. So along with objective features, you have to understand the subjective features, which is about the perception, which is about the sense of belongingness, which is about solidarity. So these are the subjective features of any ethnic movement. But you also need to understand, apart from objective and subjective, the third feature of any ethnic movement or ethnicity would be the behavioral feature. And when I say behavioral feature, I'm basically referring to the interaction of one ethnic group with the other, the way it tries to interact with other ethnic groups. So in this case, for instance, there is always, in any ethnic movement or any ethnic conflict, you'll find there is a sense of self and there is a sense of other. That self is the cohesive glue which connects people up internally with that group, and the other is the people who do not belong to that group. So the kind of interaction which is taking place between the self and the other, so that will define the behavioral feature of ethnicity. So these are the broader features that you need to understand if you have to explain any ethnic movement, or if you need to understand ethnicity as in general. With this, I move on to different theories of ethnicity, and in political science or sociology, you will find that ethnicity has been understood differently by different theoretical groups. And in this lecture, I'll broadly outline some of the broader theories, some of the major theories or the group of theories, some of the major schools of thoughts on ethnicity. And I start with a theory or a group of theories which is known as primordialism. Primordialism refers to that kind of group where, or that kind of understanding where people believe that ethnic groups exist because of traditional belief in biological factors and territorial locations. The primordial theorists, they understand that they take identity as something given, they take identity as something fixed, permanent, which is not, which cannot be changed, which is ascribed, which you inherit from the culture that you come from. So that is the primordial feature. And primordialist scholars or primordialist theorists, they'll also argue that one culture is different from other, and there is a kind of irreconcilable difference of culture, that one culture cannot coexist with other culture without any kind of cultural conflict. So excuse me. So they argue about the kind of cultural difference. They kind of argue that if you come from a particular culture, you belong to that culture, and you cannot move from one culture to other. And that is the primordial notion of ethnicity, and that is something which primordial scholars will argue, that there is kind of continuity, historical and sociological continuity between the ethnic groups of one period to the ethnic movement of the other period. So that you need to understand, and there are a group of scholars who argue on these lines, primordial lines. And if I have to quote, I'll quote one scholar who will be considered primordial scholar, the famous philosopher who is more like anthropologist, Clifford Geertz. Clifford Geertz argued that the human beings have a very natural tendency to attach with some of the primordial features. What are the primordial features, for instance? Primordial features would be that such as blood, language, territory, and cultural differences. So he argues that the human beings have a very strange tendency to attach with certain kind of culture, to attach with a certain kind of race that they come from, to attach with the blood, and attach with the language. So that tendency has led the scholars to argue that these tendencies define the culture of a particular social group or human beings. So as a result, you need to understand these primordial features if you have to explain ethnicity in general. So that is the primordial definition or primordial explanation of ethnicity. The second theory, which is equally important and which goes exactly against the primordial theory, is the modernization theory, and this is opposed to the primordial theory. It argues that there are certain modern developments which have taken place, and ethnicity is an outcome. Ethnicity is a product of that kind of modern technological and other developments. They associate, for them, ethnicity is associated with modern phenomena such as industry, capitalism, urbanization, migration, media, and people's sovereignty after the Westphalia Treaty. I mentioned you that Westphalia is taken as the Westphalian Treaty of 1648. That is taken as the period after which the modern nation states is supposed to have emerged in Europe, and after that it spread to other parts of the globe. So modernization thesis or modernization theories will argue against the primordial theory. They are exactly against or opposed to the primordial theories, and they argue that ethnicity is not something which is inherent. Ethnicity is not something which is primordial. Ethnicity is something which has emerged as an outcome of the modernization process, and they link that with industrialization, they link that with capitalism, they link that with urbanization and people's sovereignty, because they argue that ethnicity, most of the ethnic movements that you have, the ultimate demand of the ethnic movement is to achieve some kind of sovereignty, the sovereignty of nationhood. And that sovereignty, since that concept is new, you cannot take that kind of concept back to the, say, medieval period. That concept of sovereignty is important. That concept of sovereignty is something, people sovereignty. When I talk of sovereignty, I'm talking of people sovereignty. So that sovereignty has emerged only in the modern period. So you cannot take that kind of concept to the medieval or the historical ancient period. So they argue that ethnicity is something which is a modern phenomena, and it has to be understood against the backdrop of the process of modernization. And they also argue that ethnicity as a modern invention cannot be understood with the help of medieval and ancient features. Ethnic homogeneity, for instance, was not an ideal goal in early society. Ethnic homogeneity became an ideal goal only in the modern period, to cater to the needs of industrial society, to cater to the need of the modern society, what you call it, with certain kind of technological development. So this is the modernization thesis, but we have other theories. We have learned two theories by now. The first is the primordial theory, the second is the modernization theory. Now the third theory that I will be talking about is the Marxism. The Marxist theories, they take ethnicity not as something which is permanent. They believe that ethnicity they take ethnicity as a form of false consciousness, which will be replaced by class consciousness. Because as you know that in Marxist theories, the class perspective is important. They try to define the social and economic development in terms of class. So for them, they argue that since there is a kind of contradiction in the classes, so the ultimate thing would be the class struggle or the class consciousness. Ethnicity is something which is the product of the bourgeois society, which is a product of the industrial society, and this is likely to be replaced by the class consciousness. And class consciousness is something which is broader in nature, and finally the ultimate consciousness which will develop and which will replace the ethnic consciousness would be the class consciousness. So that is the argument of the Marxist scholars or the Marxist theories that you have on ethnicity. Finally, we have constructivism. Constructivism is the next group of theories, and this theory is popular in international politics, which argues again constructivist theories are opposed to the primordial theories, because primordial theories will take identity as something permanent, identity as something given. So constructivists argue that the identity is not fixed, identity is never permanent. Identity is something which is always evolving, is always changing. The identity is not something, for instance, the culture, even the cultural features, the symbols of the culture, they evolve from one period to other. So even if you try to see the historical continuity, what is happening is that one identity is constantly evolving, constantly changing, and it has changed. Sometimes it changes to the extent that it appears there is absolutely no link between the identity movement of the earlier period and the identity movement of the modern period. So that change is important here. The identity is not something fixed. Identity is something which is taken as the construction according to the constructivist scholars. So ethnic identities are not fixed but constructed by social and political forces. Identity is shifting and a product of human social interaction. So identity is always constantly changing. So what is constant about the identity is the change, not the persistence. So that is the difference between the primordial theories and the constructivist theories. So they take identity as something which is being constructed by certain technological development, by certain political or social elites to cater to the requirements of the society of that period. So we discussed all four theories now, and then I'll move on to the famous philosopher. You might have heard the name Max Weber's take on ethnicity. If you read the literature on ethnicity, you'll find that, especially if you read the classical literature, classical I mean the 19th century, 18th century and early 20th century literature, you'll find that there are not many philosophers who have argued on ethnicity. There are not many philosophers who are taking ethnicity as a category to explain the certain kind of social groupings. But very interestingly, you'll find that Max Weber has a take on ethnicity. Max Weber has tried to explain ethnicity. And according to Max Weber, ethnicity is a subjective belief in common descent because of similarities of physical type, customs, colonization and migration. According to him, for ethnicity, the real blood relationship is not important. And there is according to Max Weber again, there is a difference between ethnicity and race. Race is always based on blood relationship, but that is not the case with ethnicity. You have to understand that. Ethnicity is something which is a presumed identity. Ethnicity is something which is a created identity. It's not a kinship identity. It is a political community with belief in common identity. So here the political community becomes important because there are certain political ideals, there are certain political goals of of ethnicity. So it has to be distinguished from race, it has to be distinguished from the blood relationship and the kinship. So Max Weber tells you that ethnicity has to be understood differently. It is different from kinship. It is also different from race, for instance. Ethnicity, you also need to understand that shared ethnicity is not sufficient for group formation according to Max Weber. What you need is a political community which will bring ethnic features into action. So the difference of culture is not enough, or even the shared culture is not important for the group formation. So when the ethnic group will start behaving like a political community, so then it comes into action, then group formation takes place. And Max Weber has emphasized the role of history. He has also emphasized the role of migration in ethnic consciousness. And according to him, and I quote, ethnicity delimits social circles with those which are not identical with endogenous connubial groups. So it has a delimiting feature. Ethnicity has delimiting feature where if there are certain groups which do not belong to the shared culture, so they are taken as other. So it has delimiting function that you do not consider everybody as part of your group. You consider only those people or those only that society as part of your group which has certain shared culture, shared history, and certain shared memories. And it always tries to distinguish itself with the other social cultures, other groups, and other human organizations. Now I'll explain the modern theoretician Anthony D. Smith, the way he defines ethnicity. He is a sociologist, and he defines ethne or ethnic community as something which has existed in all eras of history. Mind it that Anthony D. Smith his definition is closer to the primordial definition, but he says that his definition is not primordial. There is a distinction between the primordial definition and Anthony D. Smith's understanding of ethnicity. While he talks of some kind of continuity, some kind of sociological continuity, but he argues that ethnicity existed in all historical periods right from the Bronze Ages. So it is not that ethnicity is something which is modern. As you have seen in the previous discussion, that modernization theory will argue that ethnicity is something which is modern, but Anthony D. Smith, the sociologist, he argues that ethnicity is not something which can be understood as a modern phenomenon. That there is always a sociological continuity between the previous historical period and the modern ethnic movements. And he argues that the paradox of ethnicity is its mutability in persistence and its persistence through change. So what is important here is that ethnicity is, what is important about ethnicity is its mutability that is constantly changing. But you need to understand that it's changing, but there is a kind of sociological continuity that is changing. It may take various forms, but there is a sense of continuity. There is a sense of continuum, and ethnicity may not be historical, but a sociological continuity do exist, where ethnicity forms elements of culture and social strategy which resurfaces in every generation. So ethnicity is providing the strategy, is providing the element of culture which will emerge in different forms in different historical periods. So ethnicity is defined by Anthony D. Smith in terms of some kind of sociological continuity from the previous period. Now I need to explain you what are the conditions for ethnic resurgence. So what are the conditions when ethnicity or ethnic movements emerge in a particular place? What you need to understand is that you need to check that whether there is an ethnic community, whether there is a consensus ethnic community existing or not. You will find that wherever there is an ethnic movement, there is a consensus ethnic community. What I mean by consensus? Consensus is that there is a sense of realization that they belong to a certain culture and they are different from others. So that consensus is important. In any ethnic movement, you will find that consensus plays a very important role. So that consensus is a very basic element of any for the emergence of any ethnic movement in a particular place. And you will also find that wherever the ethnic movements have emerged or wherever ethnic conflicts have emerged, there is always a sense of discrimination, there is always a sense of relative deprivation. And when I talk of a sense of discrimination and relative deprivation, what I mean is that the ethnic groups or ethnic communities, sometimes they feel discriminated by the other ethnic groups or by the state. It's possible that for other people there is no real discrimination. But ethnic movements, wherever ethnic movements emerge, there is always a sense of discrimination, there is always a sense of some kind of deprivation, and it's not about the real deprivation. It's about the perception. What is important to understand here is the perception, that people feel that they are being discriminated by either the other cultures or other ethnic groups or by the state. So that discrimination, that perception of discrimination, that sense of deprivation, that leads to some kind of anger, frustration among the ethnic groups, and that finally culminates in some kind of mobilization activities and some kind of group formation for certain kind of demands. Demands can be political, demands can be cultural, and demands can be complete secession, for instance, complete separation from the state. So demand would vary according to the situation. The demands are not constant. Demands will vary according to different political and social conditions. But that sense of deprivation is important to understand if you need to explain the emergence of ethnic conflict or ethnic movement in a particular place. And you'll also find that wherever you have this ethnic movement or wherever you have ethnic conflict, you'll find that there is a stratum of ethnic intellectuals. And intellectuals are those people who justify the ethnic demands of that particular group. Whether you take the case of Kashmir, you take the case of Khalistan movement in Punjab, you take the case of Quebec in Canada, or you take the case of SA in Indonesia, or you take the case of different tribes in Afghanistan. So they all have this sense of deprivation, and they also have the intellectuals. Intellectuals are those people who justify the arguments of the ethnic groups, who give a justification, a philosophical and a rational, logical justification for the demands and the discrimination that they perceive. So that role of intellectual is also important. And those intellectuals, along with some political elites, they try to mobilize people, they try to mobilize ethnic groups on the basis of the ethnic resources that they have. So the three features that I told you, that for the emergence of ethnic conflict, there has to be ethnic community, number one. There has to be a sense of discrimination. Third, there has to be a strata of ethnic intellectuals. And finally, and the fourth feature would be, in democracy, what happens that there is always some kind of political competition to grab political power. There's always that in democracy, because people are trying to mobilize people to garner votes, to get the support of the people. They're always mobilizing people through different agendas, and where excuse me, and wherever you have this ethnic movement, what you'll find that in democracy, for instance, because people have to mobilize, because the leaders have to mobilize people, you'll find that the people mobilize, or the leaders mobilize people on ethnic lines. Sometimes you have seen in the case of India, they mobilize people on caste lines, they mobilize people on religious lines. So all those, and that kind of mobilization is nothing but ethnic mobilization to gain power, to grab power. So that ethnic mobilization becomes important in a society which is not governed completely by the law, or which is not governed completely by. In fact, even this is happening in the developed as well as developing countries. If you take the case of United States, which is a developed country, for instance, even there the mobilization is taking place in the name of a race. The political parties, they always try to mobilize the black population, for instance. The political parties always, they also try to mobilize the Spanish population. So that kind of mobilization is nothing but the mobilization on ethnic lines, or they're trying to exploit the ethnic resources to get the votes. So elite competition is important, and elite compete for political power, and they take use of the ethnic resources to mobilize population. The next feature of which explains the emergence of ethnic movement is the domino effect. What has happened is that if there are ethnic movements in other parts or the neighboring countries, so that has an impact on the one particular country. If the ethnic movement is taking place in Sri Lanka, for instance, it's likely that will have an effect on India, that might affect Pakistan, and that might affect the other neighboring countries. So ethnic movement in one place has a domino impact, has a kind of demonstrative impact on the other neighboring country. So that domino impact is also something which you need to understand. And if there is a history of such movement, if there is a history of ethnic movement, so that history plays a very important role. That people, if there was a history of ethnic movement in that particular country or that particular state, so they derive confidence, they derive resources or some kind of psychological energy from the historical movement. They try to justify the contemporary ethnic movement through the historical movement of the past. So that history is important. So these were the broader conditions that I explained to make you understand that what are the conditions for ethnic resurgence, what are the conditions which lead to the emergence of ethnic movement in a place. From there, I'll move to types of ethnic conflicts. What I find interesting is that if you analyze different kind of ethnic movements in the world, you'll find that there are two kind of ethnic movements. One would be vertical, and the second would be horizontal. When I refer to the term vertical ethnic conflicts, so there you'll find that the vertical ethnic conflicts are against the state. For instance, if I have to explain, say, the Kashmiri ethnic conflict, or if I have to explain, say, Naga ethnic movement, what is happening there in the case of Kashmir, or in the case of Nagaland, or in the case of, say, the Dravidian movement in Tamil Nadu, or in the case of the Khalistani movement in Punjab, for instance, what you find interesting is that these movements are against the state. They want, the demands might vary from just some kind of cultural rights or some kind of autonomy to complete separation, as it is happening in case of Kashmir, where a minority population or some of the people in Kashmiri ethnic movement, they are asking for complete separation of the state from the state of India. So the demand might vary depending upon the depending on the political situation, but what you will find that the ethnic movements can be vertical where the movement is against the state, where it's against the nation state or the central government. And the second kind of movement, ethnic movement, is horizontal movement. Horizontal movement, you have where there is a conflict between two communities. One was the vertical movement where it's against the state, and the second is the horizontal movement where the two ethnic groups are clashing, where one ethnic group is feeling discriminated because of the presence of other ethnic group. So that kind of conflict is the horizontal ethnic conflict. For instance, the Hindu-Muslim conflict in India, where what is happening is that Hindus feel that some of the rights that Muslims are being given privilege. For instance, there's a perception in some of the people among the Hindu majority that there is Muslims are being appeased by the state. Muslims are being given more rights by the state. So that perception is important here. And for the Muslims, on the other hand, the Muslims, they feel that they are being discriminated because of the overwhelming presence of the Hindu in the state institution and in the norms and the culture of the state. So there is a sense of kind of discrimination of one community because of the presence of other, or because of some of the certain rights which have been given to the other. So that leads to kind of animosity, that leads to kind of conflict. And whenever there is at the ground level, what happens is that mobilization of one group is always against the other group. The Hindus in one particular group, for instance, would mobilize against the Muslim, and Muslims in one particular group would mobilize against the other, because they believe that the presence of one particular group in economic, social, and cultural sphere is taking away the rights of the other group. So that leads to conflict. That leads to a kind of hostility of one group against the other. So here the self versus the other becomes important. So you try to mobilize the internal group against the other group, which becomes the enemy in this kind of case. So there are two kind of conflicts, ethnic conflicts. One was vertical, which is against the state, as I explained, and the second is against the horizontal, which is against the other ethnic community. Now we need to understand what are the state responses to ethnic conflict, because the state cannot be silent in today's world when media is playing a very important role and media is capturing all kind of conflicts. And it's very important that a state should resolve the conflict. It's very important the state should try to deal with the conflicts. What is happening? The kind of responses that you see, if you explain all the cases, what you'll find that there are three kind of responses by the state. The first response is assimilation. Here, what the state tries to do to resolve the problem, the state adopts some kind of coercive measures. where the purpose is to assimilate in a way that ethnic groups will not remain important, and their mobilization is cut down because of the assimilation process. So that process is coercive, but there are instances where some of the states have tried to do this assimilation. One case is the case of Russia in Chechnya. You know that in Chechnya, one of the provinces of Russia, there's an ethnic conflict, and what the state tried to do, that it tried to suppress the ethnic movement through by sending military and by coercive measures. So that is the process of assimilation. The second process of assimilation can also be when what you do is that in that particular locality, if that particular ethnic group is living in a separate area, so what you do is that you try to send the other group people, other culture people in that area to settle down, so that the dominance of that group goes away. That particular ethnic group does not remain dominant in that particular group. So you try to assimilate in that broader culture, and it is done through various methods. One is coercive, one through sending people to settle down in that territory. Sometimes you try to change the history, sometimes you try to change the cultural symbols. So these are the methods through which you try to assimilate the ethnic culture of a particular territory or a particular group. The second type of response would be accommodation of ethnic aspirations of the people, and this accommodation is done through the federal structure that you have. You know that in federalism, the aspiration, different cultures, and all the different ethnic groups are given certain rights, and those rights are recognized in the constitution. Those rights are given to that ethnic group to accommodate the aspirations of the people, and this is done within the broader framework of central-state relationship or within the broader federal structure. For instance, in the case of Kashmir, Article 370, as you know, that has given certain privileged status to Kashmir, and that was a part of negotiation when Kashmir was becoming part of India. So that was a part of negotiation, and those special rights are very important, and those special rights were given so that and that ethnic group, that Kashmiri ethnic people, they should not feel out of place in India, and they should enjoy certain rights so that they can maintain their culture, they can maintain their autonomy, they can maintain their some kind of ethnic aspiration that they had in that period. So those special rights are given by the state, by the central state, to resolve ethnic conflicts, and many of the states have done it through different methods by giving special rights to different kind of ethnic groups in a country. The second extreme, there were two methods that you learned. One was assimilation, second was accommodation, and third method of state dealing with the ethnic conflict is the separation. What happens is that when a state realizes that that the problems cannot be solved through assimilation, the problems cannot be solved through accommodation, then separation becomes the ultimate motive. If I have to explain in the case of this separation, this strategy is adopted by the state as a last resort. For instance, in the case of in 1947, when Pakistan was getting independent, and as you know, there was a history of conflict and the demands of the Muslim population to have independent state, and the role of Muslim League, you know, the role of Jinnah, etc. So what the state in 1947 did, that they state of India created a separate state of Pakistan. And Pakistan was created on the basis of a certain religious identity, and the religious identity was Islam, and Pakistan became an Islamic country. India remained a secular state because India had different kind of population. It has Hindus, Muslim, Christian, Buddhist, and Jain, and Punjabis. So these India remained secular. India did not adopt any particular religion, and instead it adopted secularism as the basis of Indian nationalism. But creation of Pakistan was a kind of strategy adopted by the state to resolve the problem of a certain ethnic group. So Pakistan was created in 1947, or as you know that Bangladesh was created in 1971 when Bangladesh separated from Pakistan in 1971. So it emerged as an independent state. And in the case of Soviet Union in 1991, the Soviet Union got split, as you know, and the Soviet Union collapsed. and 15 new republics, which were the part of the Soviet Union, all of them became independent. So all 15 states became the part of became new states, and most of the states, they were created on the basis of either linguistic identity or some kind of cultural differences. Whether it was case of Kazakhstan, Kyrgyzstan, Estonia, Latvia, Lithuania. So all these states were primarily they were having a different kind of language, or they had a different kind of culture. So these states emerged after the separation or the breakup of the Soviet Union. So separation is another strategy which is adopted by the states to resolve the problem of ethnic conflict. But keep in mind, that's the last resort. That's the last strategy adopted by the state. So to sum up this section, you have three strategies of the state. One is assimilation, second is accommodation, third is separation. And then after this, I'll move to the ethnic conflicts and the dilemma of the democratic states. The problem with the democracy is that democracy is based on certain kind of political mobilization, and most of the democracies, very interesting to note that most of the democracies throughout the world, they have failed to resolve the problem of ethnic conflict. Most of the states are facing some kind of ethnic conflicts in its nation state, in its domain. And Robert Dahl, who is a famous political scientist and philosopher, he argues that accommodating ethnic aspirations is the most difficult conundrum of liberal democracy. Liberal democracy has failed to accommodate the ethnic aspirations of the people, and that's primarily because of the electoral politics in a democracy. What happens that during the process of electoral mobilization, the politics turns ethnic, and in democracy, you'll always find that minorities always feel some kind of discrimination, because in majoritarian kind of politics, which supports democracy, or democracy is always based on majoritarian kind of politics. In that kind of politics, minorities do not get the proportionate representation because of the electoral politics, and as a result, the mobilization takes place, mobilization among the minority, and also majority takes place on the basis of ethnic lines, and as a result, you see that the minorities feel discriminated because of the dominance of majority in electoral process and in democracy. But please keep in mind that even ethnic self-determination or ethnic separation is not a solution of the problem, because what happens that even if you allow the state to separate, what happens that the problem which was there at the bigger level, the problem will again continue at the microcosm. So the ethnic conflict which was there at the nation state, previous nation state, when the new states emerge, when the new nation states emerge, it bound to have certain kind of minority who will ask for certain kind of ethnic rights, and ethnic movements emerge even in the new states. So now I've discussed broadly the different features of ethnicity, different features of ethnic movement, and I would like to give some of the examples from ethnic movements in India. If you see the ethnic movements in India, there are different kind of ethnic movements in India, and because India is a multicultural country, and there are different kind of ethnicity living here. So you will find that there are different kind of ethnic aspirations of people in India. One is the political, and for instance, Gorkhaland in West Bengal, what you see that they are asking for some kind of autonomy within the state of West Bengal, or they are also asking the state. They are asking for the creation of the new state, and for instance, ethnic movements in Kashmir. So that is those movements are political in nature, where they are demanding the state for certain rights. In Gorkhaland, they are asking for autonomy, and some of the ethnic movements in Kashmir, people or the groups are asking for separation, and the vociferous demand is for separation, while there are other groups who would settle down with some kind of further autonomy. And you also have in India linguistic movements, linguistic ethnic movements. For instance, the Dravidian movement in Tamil Nadu, which was there in 1960s and 70s, so that Dravidian movement was linguistic movement. It was not religious, it was not necessarily political, it was linguistic movement. And so what you find is in India you have the political movement, linguistic movement, and you also have a religious movement. For instance, when I gave you the example of Pakistan, the creation of Pakistan, that was based on the linguistic movement, that was based on religious movement, because identity of Pakistan was based on religious identity. So that was a religious movement, that was a religious ethnic movement. You also have tribal movement, for instance, tribal, where the tribal groups, for instance, in Nagaland, some of the groups in Chhattisgarh, for instance, so they are asking for certain kind of rights which are, and the mobilization is based on some kind of tribal identity. So these are the broader ethnic movements which you have in India. So that was the background of ethnicity or different features of ethnicity in the lecture. Now I transit from ethnicity to nationalism, and I'll explain how ethnicity transforms into nationalism. Or here my purpose is to explain that what are the conditions under which ethnic movement will transform into a nation state, or when ethnicity starts demanding for a nationality or nation state. First you have the first stage is ethnic group. That transforms into some kind of ethnic community. Ethnic group will transform into ethnic community, and after that ethnic community will transform into some kind of ethnic nationalism. So the process is gradual. You have ethnic group transforming into ethnic community, and then that will transform into ethnic nationalism. And I've taken the help of the famous philosopher or the sociologist Anthony D. Smith. He gives 4 conditions under which ethnicity will transform into some kind of nationalist demand. First is that ethnic category must have transformed itself into ethnic community. So that transformation is important, that ethnic category must have transformed into ethnic community. Second is that similar movements must be there across the globe. As I told you in the previous lecture that some kind of domino impact is there. So ethnic similar movements must have been there in different parts of the globe. Third is that there must be a stratum of ethnic intellectuals. So that ethnic intellectuals is important. They play a very important role in mobilization. So there must be a strata of ethnic intellectuals, and such conditions have been fulfilled in history through war, through revolution, or through migration. So these are the methods through which ethnicity has mobilized or transformed from ethnic community to some kind of demand for ethnic nationalism. So these were the 4 conditions for transformation. What are the examples? If I have to give some examples of ethnic transformation, for instance, I gave you the creation of Pakistan and creation of Bangladesh. So how, if you see the history, 1916 to 1947, the way Muslim League is trying to create an identity which is based on religion, and a Muslim identity which is based on religion, and then the transformation of that group, ethnic group, into a kind of nationality demand, where finally there is a separation and the new state is emerging in the form of Pakistan. And in 1971, Pakistan is separating and Bangladesh is emerging. Pakistan, as you know, Pakistan was created on the basis of religion. But when the demand for Bangladesh came, people in Bangladesh started fighting against the state of Pakistan. Why? Because there was a mobilization on the basis of language. Bengali language was different from the language, Urdu language, which was then in Pakistan. And there was a linguistic mobilization in Bangladesh, and Bangladesh finally separated in 1971. So from 1950 to 1971, that is the period when the Bengali ethnic identity is transforming from ethnic group to ethnic nationality, and finally leading to the separation of the state. Finally, and then in the case of Soviet Union, again you have the breakup of the 15 republics, and they are becoming 15 new states or new nation states. So these are the new nation states which in the 1980s they are transforming from ethnic group to ethnic nationality group. So the transformation is taking place from ethnic group to ethnic nationality, and finally leading to the emergence of new nation state in the form of 15 new states after the collapse of the Soviet Union. And if I have to give some other examples, for example, Chechnya in Russia today, or the Quebec in Canada, or Irish movement that you have in Ireland. So these are the movements where there's almost ethnic groups have transformed themselves into not only ethnic community but ethnic nationalism. And I'll try to explain ethnicity and its transformation into nationalism with the help of 3 famous theoreticians. One is Benedict Anderson, the second is Ernest Gellner, and third is Eric Hobsbawm. So these are the famous philosophers or famous thinkers who have explained the emergence of nationalism and the way nationalism helps in the formation of the nation state. First, I am coming to Benedict Anderson, and you might have heard the concept of imagined community. He explains nation state as an imagined community. Why imagined? Because even without knowing each other, an image of communion exists. People in India, for instance, you may not be knowing the other people from Tamil Nadu, you may not be knowing person from Kashmir, you may not be knowing from people from Assam, for instance, but there is a kind of sense of attachment. There is a sense of belongingness where you feel that all of us belong to a certain nation state. So that imagination is important, and that is what Benedict Anderson tells you when he talks of imagined community. So he explains nation state as an imagined community where no nation imagines itself coterminous with the whole mankind. There is always a delimiting factor for nationalism, where a nation state would always like to delimit in terms of territory and in terms of cultural imagination. And that cultural imagination, has a kind of limit. That it's not like Christianity, it's not like Islam. Christianity might think of entire mankind, but nation state never thinks in terms of mankind, entire mankind. Nation states will always try to limit itself with a certain culture, certain political and cultural territory. So that delimiting factor is important here if you need to understand the imagined community. And imagined community always aspires for sovereignty, where it would not like interference or intervention from other nation states or other ethnic groups. So that the sovereignty is important. And according to Benedict Anderson, and this is important to understand, that what made communities imagine, what made these groups imagine, was interaction between capitalism, print technology, and the fatality of human linguistic diversity. So what he says is that the interaction of capitalism as a broader political economy, interaction of capitalism, print technology, and the linguistic diversity, that created a condition for the emergence of nation state. So if you need to understand nationalism or the emergence of nationalism, you need to understand the interaction of these variables, interaction of capitalism, and print technology. Print means newspapers, media, etc., and the books, the print technology, and the interaction of linguistic diversity. So that created a very conducive condition for the imagination of the people, where they imagine a certain political territory, as their own. So that imagination is important according to Benedict Anderson, and that's what he means when he says imagined community. Next you have Ernest Gallner, who says that nationalism is a product of industrial society. There are certain requirements of constant mobility and migration because of the industrial requirements. Nationalism is based on the modern division of labor. There are certain requirements of constant mobility because people have to move from one industry to other, and people have to move from agriculture to industry. So there is a constant migration taking place in the industrial society, and that constant migration is leading to leading to the breakup of the traditional ties. Thus, breaking apart the traditional ties, and the identity, a new kind of identity, is becoming important. Because for the industrial society, there is a need, there has to be a search for new ties where culture must be coterminous with the state, and nationalism fits in here, because you have to create a culture which is broader in nature, and because people are moving, people are migrating, and there is a kind of amalgamation of different migrant population. So where ethnic ties, the cultural primordial ties, are not so important. So what becomes important here is the nationalistic ties, the broader nationalism which tries to link people together. So that becomes important, and that is also created by universal standardized education. So that is one of the features of which is important to understand according to Gellner. So he links nationalism as a result of industrial society and the requirements of industrial society. Finally, we have Eric Hobsbawm, who argues that nation is an invention and is a social engineering. Nation is not something which is given, nation is not something which is permanent, nation is something which is a kind of invention. So there are two things which are important to understand here. According to Eric Hobsbawm, there are certain myths and there are certain realities. What is myth according to Eric Hobsbawm? Mythical part is that nation as a natural, inherent political destiny. So nation is not something which is fixed, nation is not something which is permanent, and nation is not something which is given. So that is something, the myth created for all the nation states by the political elites and the political culture. What is reality? Reality is that it's an artifact, it's an invention, and it's a social engineering. And nationalism takes pre-existing culture or merely invents it. So nationalism might be based on certain pre-existing culture, and if it's not there, then it might completely invent or create a new culture. So in some cases it can be just the creation, innovation. In some cases it can be based on the previous culture. So nationalism is something which is constructed from above, but it has to be analyzed from below, because the state is playing a role, the people who are at the top, they are playing the role. So it's all the construction is important, the way nation state is being constructed, the way nation state is being invented. So that is important according to Eric Hobsbawm. And this is nation is something which is always evolving, is always changing. Nation is not something which is fixed. And I would like to if you see the map of India, the 19th century map of India, you will find that in that map, 19th century included Afghanistan as a part of India during the British period. Afghanistan was part of India, then Burma was part of India, and it has a huge territory. Kashmir, the entire part of Kashmir was part of India. If you see the picture here, then the red part, just see the picture of India. The red part, India, it shows that it's touching Persia on one side, on the top is touching the Russian Empire, and on the eastern side is touching the Southeast Asian countries. So India was a huge country in 19th century. Now, as you know, in the modern map, India has been sliced in the sense that Burma is not a part of India, Afghanistan is not a part of India. Again, Kashmir is now partly under the control of Pakistan. So the nation state is not fixed. Nation state is always changing in one way or the other. And this is not the case of just India. All the nations have changed. I gave you the example of Pakistan, that how Pakistan was part of India before 1947 and how it has split in 1971 and Bangladesh became the part of a different nation. Bangladesh became a different nation and it separated from Pakistan. So not all the countries are constantly changing. They are not fixed. So nationalism has to be understood in terms of constantly changing phenomenon. And there are two kinds of nationalism again. One is ethnic and one is civic nationalism. Civic nationalism is based on citizenship, and in principle it is open to all the people and it can be acquired. For example, the United States. But ethnic nationalism, on the other hand, it is inherent and it cannot be acquired if one does not belong to one. It is ascriptive and acquisitive. But please keep in mind that in today's world, most of the nation states are promoting civic nationalism. And there is a kind of conflict between civic nationalism and ethnic nationalism. And some of the people support ethnic nationalism, but most of the people would argue for some kind of civic nationalism, which is based on the right of citizenship. So any citizen of that particular country will enjoy the same kind of rights, and there will be no privileged status of one ethnic group over the other. Finally, I am coming to the conclusion of this entire debate on ethnicity and nationalism. What you need to understand is that both ethnicity and nationalism are evolving categories. They are not fixed, they are not permanent, they are evolving categories. Ethnic community will transform into nation when cultural resources and symbols are used by political community. And the notion of nation being permanent is a grand myth. It never was and will never be fixed. Think of example of Pakistan, for instance, the way it has changed. So the nation is not something which is permanent. Although because of our limited time period, we cannot see beyond a limited time period. As a result, it appears that nation state is permanent, but nation states have changed over the time. So has nationalism and nation. And you also need to understand that in modern sense, a nation was not before the Treaty of Westphalia of 1648, and the emergence of European Union exhibited a new kind of form of organization of the society. So what you see in today's world is that on the one hand you have ethnic demands for nationhood, and at the other the new forms of supranational structures emerging in the form of European Union. And finally, to conclude, nations will continue to take new forms, but the persistence of nation state cannot be doubted in foreseeable future. So nation will continue to take new forms, it will continue to change, but you cannot doubt the persistence of nation state in the limited future that we can see. With this, I come to the conclusion. I hope you enjoyed the lecture. Thank you so much.
So it is a continuous process, as the nation state was also existing in the Greek city.
Right. Right, yeah. You are absolutely right. I mean, that's a very good point to understand that some of the people who are especially primordialists, they argue that nation state was there during the Greek nation state. People also argue that India was also historically a nation state, but most of the modern definitions, most of the modern theories, and they argue that you should understand nation state as a modern phenomena rather than taking something which is very historical, because the nation state is equated with the post-Westphalia Treaty, 1648 and afterwards. So nation state is taken by most of the scholars as modern phenomena rather than as a historical, as in the medieval or the ancient period, because the notion of sovereignty came after the Treaty of Westphalia, and before that you had the states, you had the Mughal state, you had the Mauryan states, but what you didn't have is the nation state. So you have to distinguish between the state and the nation state.
Okay. So, well friends, with these words we conclude the lecture. I thank all of you for watching the lecture, and on your behalf I thank Dr. Rajan Kumar for giving such an insightful lecture. Thank you very much.